So Fox Business Network is really happy over the left turning on Bernie Sanders. They're going to try to exploit this rift. They're going to be like cackling hyenas here, doing divide and conquer of the left further. So let's watch their segment. We'll talk about what they get right, and then we'll also criticize them for what they're doing.
Calling it Bernie's burnout, progressives still aiming for massive spending despite the strong jobs numbers. But many are now distancing themselves from Senator Sanders, saying he is not pushing President Biden far enough to the left. Really? Well, joining me now, former senior White House advisor and America First legal founder, Stephen Miller. Stephen, so glad to have you with us today. I want to talk a little bit about the reaction to Senator Sanders. This is interesting to me. We're just several months into the administration's tenure, and we're already hearing Senator Sanders isn't doing his job. Your reaction to that?
Yes, it's quite astonishing. They should be very grateful, progressives on the left, to Senator Sanders. Immensely grateful, because his agenda has been adopted really without alteration by President Biden. We have Joe Biden in the Oval Office, but we have Bernie Sanders policies being put into effect. So the only thing I can think, and this sounds mean, but it's not me saying it. The only thing I can think is that progressives just have soured on Sanders as a spokesperson. In other words, while I might think, or others might think, that he does a good job explaining communist policies, albeit I think communist policies would be the ruination of our country and every other country, but he does a good job putting a spin on them to make them sound less insane than they actually are. Apparently, some progressives think he's no longer their most effective spokesperson, which, frankly, I'm surprised to hear.
Stephen, is this the point in the progressive movement where the movement starts to kind of sabotage itself from the inside out? It's the ideological purity contest that nobody wins because nobody's left standing. That seems to be where things are already going at this point.
Well, they're obviously falling all over themselves to stake out the furthest left ideological territory that they possibly can.
All right, so there's a bunch of stuff to say here. Some of it is true, but most of it is not. So is it accurate that the left, some aspects of the left, some factions of the left are turning on Bernie? Yeah, that's definitely true. But the reason that they're giving is really not adequate. So as far as I could tell, the people who are upset with Bernie, including myself, we are mad that he isn't pushing Biden hard enough and he's not getting tangible wins that we wanted. That's what it all comes down to. So when you look at the left agenda, what does the left care about? The left cares about a $15 minimum wage and Medicare for all and, Green New Deal, universal basic income. There's a lot of stuff that the left cares about. I'd say ending the wars too. Now, Biden gets half credit on that front because he's drawing down. But we're going to see how many U.S. operatives remain in Afghanistan, and I think it'll probably be about 1,000. So, again, only half credit. If we want you to get out, we want you to get out for real. But, yeah, the idea that Bernie's agenda is being adopted without alteration by Joe Biden is simply factually wrong and incredibly stupid. Because if that was the case, he would have fought for Medicare for all. He would have fought for $15 minimum wage. He didn't fight for those things at all. Not even a little bit. Even now, with the infrastructure negotiation, what's he doing? 2 separate bills. One, a terrible bipartisan regular order bill, and one, hopefully, a half-decent partisan reconciliation bill. That's not what Bernie Sanders would do as president. That's not what he'd do at all. Even in the previous COVID relief bills, are there some good parts of it? Absolutely. But he said $2,000 checks, and we got $1,400 checks. I don't buy the $1,400 plus $600 argument. I think $2,000 checks means $2,000 checks regardless of what Trump did before that. So there weren't recurring checks. Credit for the expansion of the child tax credit. The piece of legislation was okay, but don't lie to me and say this is Bernie's agenda without alteration. That's just factually wrong. And so the things that Biden did that I'll give credit for is the executive orders that when he first got in office, that first week, he did a bunch of executive orders just reversing Trump's executive orders. Those are all great. I give him credit for all those. half credit on the COVID relief bill because parts of it were good. But there were also parts of it that were bad, and he didn't really fight for $15 minimum wage. And, Bernie has the power to sort of get together with the squad, have a voting bloc in the House, and they can assert more pressure on Biden if they say, well, just block the whole agenda if you don't do X, Y, or Z. Whether it's, they could do it, they could force him to do stuff through executive order. They could say, we're going to block everything unless you decriminalize marijuana in the entire country or legalize marijuana in the entire country just by taking it off the scheduled substances list. They could block everything and say you have to do that. They could block everything and say you have to eliminate all student loan debt or eliminate $30,000 or $50,000 of it. They could do that, but they haven't done that. So I think the frustration from the left is that you don't really see Bernie using the proper approach to get Biden to do the correct things, and you don't see left Congress people using the right approach to get Biden to do the right things. And so when Democrats have control of the White House, the Senate, and the House, and we're not really getting any of our main policies implemented, that's going to lead to frustration. And what you have to get people incremental wins here and there in order for the movement to feel satiated. And they haven't done that. So that's why factions of the left are turning on Bernie. And I mean, they're not wrong. I think they're correct in their frustration. And I'm one of those people who's frustrated about it. So the idea that, we've just soured on Bernie as a spokesperson, that's not true. It's not true. I think he's a great spokesperson. I just think he's not taking the correct, tangible approach here to get the wins that we need. And by the way, LOL at Bernie being a communist. He explains his communist policies well in a way that doesn't sound communist. If you think Bernie's a communist, you don't know anything about political labels at all. You don't know anything about political labels at all, not even a little bit. Not even the tiniest bit. He's a mild social democrat. He says he's a democratic socialist. He's not even a democratic socialist. Based off what he explains, he's a social democrat. An FDR New Deal style Democrat. That's what he is. Obviously, Bernie's a lot better on social issues than FDR was, but that's obvious. And yeah, the final thing is, this is the only point that they're right about is, it is true that the progressive movement is sabotaging itself now. There's no doubt about it. Where you put the blame for that is a different question. And again, I would sort of put the blame on the leaders or the lack of leaders in the progressive movement, because again, you needed to have very tangible wins that you could show the progressive base in order for them to be like, yes, we're on the right path, keep going. And there haven't been those. And so since those don't exist, that's why I think the left is turning on itself. So I really do put the blame with the leaders. I put the blame with the left Congress people. I put the blame with Bernie. I do. But that's still no excuse for it. In other words, on the left, we should be smart enough to know, here's where the shortcomings are, here's where we're failing. We should be smart enough to know that while also not self-sabotaging and not turning it into all-out war and not doing counterproductive things. Because any sort of winning coalition, I mean, these are the facts, guys. Any sort of winning coalition is going to include everybody who's even nominally on the left. Any sort of winning coalition is going to have to keep leftist Congress people, Democratic Socialists, Social Democrats, even liberal Democrats, even like center-left Democrats are going to have to be part of a coalition if you really want to win on these policies. And then even the occasional like libertarian-leaning Republican on certain issues, like Rand Paul on war, for example, or Justin Amash on whatever, he's an independent now, but Justin Amash on issues involving like the NSA and whatnot. The problem is we have to be honest enough to call out the mistakes, but also level-headed enough to not sink the entire ship and ruin the whole chance of ever getting anything done in the process. So it's hard because you have to simultaneously call out the mistakes, which involves calling people out, but also still stick together and come together in a unifying way where we agree on the issues that matter. And that's a difficult balancing act for people because people are very tribal. People are very tribal. People sometimes look at the world in a very black and white way. You're either with me or you're against me. And that is a guaranteed mixture or recipe for failing at politics from now until the end of time. And so I do think they're right that the progressive movement is sabotaging itself. And by the way, that's why they're covering it. They're covering it because they want to exploit that rift. they want to do divide and conquer. And by pointing it out, they're aiding and abetting divide and conquer. So it's a paradox and it's a conundrum, and I'm not saying I have all the answers. But what I am saying is, if you ever want to win on anything, policy-wise, and actually get political victories, we need to, number one, be able to call out the mistakes in our leaders and adjust course properly. But number two, in the process of doing that, make sure we don't cancel everybody involved, therefore undermining our chance of ever getting anything done because we burned 1,000 bridges. You see what I'm saying? And that's a tough balancing act. Calling out leaders for being wrong and trying to get them to adjust course strategically, while also making clear, just because I think you're wrong on this doesn't mean we're not going to work together where we can and how we can in order to win in the long run. And this is why politics is so hard. I'm a big believer in effective, efficient leadership. Of course I support democracy and egalitarianism wherever humanly possible, but leaders do need movements do need leaders, I flipped it. Movements do need leaders to remind everybody what the vision is, what the mission is, how we get from point A to point B. And the thing I'll say right now is, hurts me to say it, but it's true, there's not a single leader among them, man. There's not a single leader among them in Washington, D.C. There really isn't. And because there's a power vacuum right now, it is being filled with endless sniping and, everybody going right for everybody else's jugular. And nothing's ever going to get accomplished that way. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. So, again, I don't have all the answers, but we have to find a way to call out our leaders for being wrong on strategy and try to get them to correct the course, and while also making sure in the process of doing that, we don't isolate ourselves and make everybody hate us, leaving us even worse off and further away from our victories than we were before. So that's the conundrum. I guess we're all going to try to go ahead and work on that.